Our show it's going to be unique.
You are what you do. You can say any amount of things that you want to say, but what you do is what everybody sees.
People are like, oh, I'm just going to JV it. Like, let's just JV it. Like, what the hell is that mean?
I cannot tell you how excited I am to hang out with you guys today, so thank you so much.
Well, then that end buyer could come back and say, well, I didn't fully understand that it was subject to.
That's not a thing. Like, the SEC has thought of all of these things. They've been here since 1932.
And you can do what you want with your property.
Buyers have time, they have negotiating power, they have options.
Oh my gosh, I am blown away by your inexperience, and they've been in business 20 years.
And that includes things other people put on your property, right? It's your property that'll be okay. Suddenly, Cousin Jimmy's in a lawsuit.
A novation is replacing one contract or one obligation with another.
Out with the old, in with the new.
Yes.
Hey, good morning, everybody. Welcome to the show. Today, our show's topic is post-election temperature check. I'm Andy Fowler, and I'm here with Sean St. Clair. If you're new to the show, make sure to like our channel and subscribe. You can find us on YouTube, Facebook, and X at the handle @INREM Podcast. That's @INREM Podcast. We want you to go to YouTube. We want you to subscribe. It helps us out a ton. Also, on Apple, Spotify, or any of the other major podcast platforms, you can go there and download an audio version of the podcast. We'd like you to go there, subscribe, like, and leave us a comment, a review. It helps us out a ton. We appreciate it. With that, we're going to go to Sean, who has our legal update.
Thank you, Andy. So my legal update today is discussing the new rule that has been propounded by FinCEN, which is the FinCEN Residential Real Estate Transfers rule that will be effective December of 2025. So for those of you listening, you've probably heard the term FinCEN before. It's a government agency that basically falls under the purview of the Corporate Transparency Act that became effective in January of 2024, which requires that all LLCs, corporations, with some exceptions, they have to file beneficial ownership information by the end of this year, or if they were formed in 2024, they have to file that beneficial ownership information within 30 days of forming an LLC. And so FinCEN is the agency that collects all of that information. So they have a website and all that information has to be plugged in, and there's significant penalties if you don't qualify, if you don't properly and timely file. And so it is a requirement. So, you know, for those of you listening, if you have LLCs that were formed prior to 2024 and they fall within the category of LLCs that must report this information, make sure to get that done before the end of this year. But today I want to talk about not a law. So the Corporate Transparency Act is a law. I want to talk about an administrative rule. So something that was just decided by this agency called FinCEN, and they have decided to apply it to certain transfers of residential real estate to LLCs. And so basically, if an LLC buys or purchases real estate or acquires real estate by transfer, beginning in December 2025, the professionals like title companies, attorneys, those assisting with that transfer, they are going to have an obligation to basically report certain beneficial ownership information regarding the LLC and certain information regarding the transaction to FinCEN, thus increasing the costs of closing those transactions. So when does this apply? When does this information have to be reported? So it starts in December of 2025, and it applies to any non-financed transaction. So a non-finance transaction would be the LLC buys it in cash. The owner of the LLC, maybe they acquired the property originally, and then they transfer it from their names to the LLC. So there's no loan involved in that. Or the LLC obtains a hard money loan to purchase it, or some other non-federally insured loan to purchase the property. In that case, that would be a non-finance transaction. Basically, a finance transaction for purposes of this rule is a transaction in which the underlying lender, the financial institution, has a suspicious activity report requirement placed upon them. So financial institutions, banks, certain lenders have a duty to report information to the federal government regarding suspicious activity. And so if a lender that has that duty is involved in the transaction, then there is no reporting requirement by the LLC. But if a lender like that is not involved in the transaction, then that information must be reported by the title company or the attorney, for example, preparing the warranty deed that transfers the property. The main exemption to this rule is if the LLC is publicly traded. So if the LLC is publicly traded, they do not have to comply with this rule. Or the professionals who are handling the transfer of the property don't have to comply with this rule. So basically what this means is, and I've attended at least one seminar now where a title company representative talked about this rule, and they basically said for these types of transactions where the LLC is acquiring the property in a non-finance transaction and the LLC is not publicly traded and we have to report this information, we are going to charge more for this particular transaction. So basically, at this point, it's become more expensive for your small to medium-sized business to engage in this type of transaction, to compete in the real estate market. So if you're a publicly traded company, you don't have that cost, you don't have that expense. So now, they have a competitive advantage when it comes to a real estate transaction. Or if you're going and obtaining financing from a lender who has that reporting requirement, then you don't have to pay the extra escrow fees or charges. Our office will likely, for those transactions, have to charge more because now we have more work we have to do to basically transfer that property to an LLC. So it's basically going to be a little bit of a hindrance. It's going to cost more for LLCs, your medium-sized, mom and pop LLCs who don't finance their transactions or who are conveying it from their names to their LLC to compete out there in the marketplace. And unfortunately, your publicly traded corporations are going to have a little bit of a competitive edge now, and your individuals are going to have a little bit of a competitive edge if they're using because they don't have to report at all because they're individuals taking title. So unfortunately, we're stuck with this rule right now, but we're talking today about the outcome of the election and what that might mean. And maybe we'll get into this a little bit with our guests today and see where it goes. But for right now, as of December 2025, there is this additional reporting requirement for transfers to LLCs that are non-financed transfers, which are going to increase the expenses for those LLCs to acquire real estate.
All right, Sean, thank you. Yeah, it's a new year and new reporting requirements. Happy New Year. Always exciting. All right, with that, let's go into a couple announcements. We have the Creative Finance Collective every Tuesday at 3:00 p.m. Arizona time. That's 3 p.m. Arizona time. Make sure to join us. What do we do in the Creative Finance Collective? Well, professionals, mainly lawyers in the space of creative finance, get together and workshop and talk through what they're seeing in creative finance, what we're seeing in the laws with respect to our different jurisdictions that we practice in. And we're there really to answer questions from you, the listener. So if you have a question about creative finance, want to learn a little bit about it, maybe need a referral to a lawyer in your area that might be able to help you on a specific question, that's what we're there for. We're there for an hour or until we stop getting questions. So it is important for you, the listener, to be there, to engage with us live. And as long as you're engaging, we'll be engaging. So we'd appreciate you there. You can find that on YouTube, Facebook, and X as well. Post your questions in the chat, and we'll get to them. Also, in today's episode, we're going to take any questions that we get in the final 15 minutes. So as you're listening, don't wait to post a question. Post it in the chat now or as you think about it, and we'll be taking note of those and addressing those questions in the final 15 minutes of the episode. With that, we're going to get into our topic today. And hey, we had a huge election. That's all we heard about on the news for months and months and months. And now We're not receiving texts anymore. Now we're not seeing commercials anymore. The election has happened. We get to move forward with our lives. But what does that mean? What does it mean to move forward with our lives with what appears to be a directionally different executive branch, a directionally different Senate of the United States, and how does that impact real estate? And with us to discuss that topic is Jeff Watson. Jeff, thanks for being with us.
My pleasure to be here, gentlemen.
Yeah, so Jeff, for those, you've been on with us a few times. We have a few different episodes. By the way, if you want to know what it's like to do subto with an IRA, or Jeff is the kind of guy that can tackle and address those kind of advanced topics. But why don't you give our listeners a little bit about your background, how you got into doing what you're doing?
All right. So for those of you that don't know me, my name's Jeff Watson. I'm a lawyer licensed to practice law in the state of Ohio. And you can find me at a blog called watsoninvested.com. And I have a very small boutique law practice. Most of what I do involves self-directed IRAs. I do some content teaching and sharing. I've written an email newsletter for a dozen years now. And this all got started. My whole involvement in a lot of areas got started as a result of coming out of the big short sale era. I was just another lawyer grinding it away, buying some houses here and there until the short sale phenomenon hit America. And it hit Ohio first back in 2005, 2004. Got pretty good at short sales. Came up with a different transactional methodology with the help of some friends at some title companies. And that transactional methodology kind of vaulted me and some of my colleagues into the national spotlight. Ultimately, it got us to the attention of Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae. Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae then issued an underwriting bulletin where they pretty much said they're not fans of the methodology that we had come up with because, i.e., investors were making more money and Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae were taking bigger discounts than they thought they should have to. So that required us to fight back. So that was the first time I ever had worked with a lobbyist in Washington, D.C. It was out of necessity. A bullseye got put on my back and we had to do something about it. At the end of the day, we didn't get everything we wanted, but we got a clear name. That was the most important thing. And then we also got a path forward as to deed restrictions and language on reselling properties bought via short sale, foreclosures, etc. That then gave me an experience of what it's like to work inside the Beltway. A few years later, some friends of mine come back to me because of my work I was doing with National RIA at the time. And they said, listen, we need your help on this effort to change Dodd-Frank to help out sellers that want to do installment sales, seller financing. So I got involved with that, have now co-written a bill currently pending in Congress, HR 3464. And that got me more and more politically involved. And then in the last year and a half, I've gotten more politically involved than I ever have in my life. Year and a half ago, I had the opportunity to meet a man by the name of Bernie Moreno. Some friends of mine got me to go to a fundraiser of his. I brought some friends of mine with me. And today, Bernie Moreno is the senator-elect from the state of Ohio, doing what J.D. Vance has done. And those are the only two men that have ever gone from private sector to now a statewide elected office in the first attempt in the state of Ohio. Now, J.D. Vance is the vice president-elect, Bernie Moreno, senator-elect. So I and some friends were at the beginning of getting Bernie Moreno started. We just had a little bit of effort because that man is a phenomenal organizer, leader. I'm so excited to see him in the United States Senate. Then I put a lot of heart and effort into two different friends running for Congress. Unfortunately, neither one of them made it. But boy, did I learn a lot. Boy, did I get a lot of access with other key members of Congress. Multiple conversations with Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson. A couple of conversations with, Judiciary Chairman Jim Jordan, and got a real flavor for where things are going. And I would love to talk about some of the things that we're seeing. And I'm going to begin by just saying, folks, if you don't hear anything else that I say, please take a close look at a number of state races. Trump may have won at the top of the ticket, but the very next vote down, Trump's strength wasn't enough to get certain people into the United States Senate. Yes, we're going to have 53 Republican senators. We kind of knew it was going to be a swing shift because of the number of retirees and things like that. 53 is a good pickup, but it could have been 56 if people would have really gotten out and put some effort into it. We could have had 56 Republican senators. And so that tells me that the national mood is one thing, but the state by state mood is something different. And we've got to be very aware of that. And so if there's one thing I'm going to say, it's please do not fall back asleep. Do not think that everything is going to be just fine, because it's not going to be just fine. Before the show, we were talking about what's happening now at the local level, what's happening now at the state level. And if you're a real estate investor, if you're a landlord in particular, if you are a housing provider, I much prefer the term housing provider over landlord, you need to begin consistently talking very publicly about how much of a percentage increase you have experienced in real estate taxes and in insurance premiums, and that those are the main drivers. Insurance premiums, real estate taxes, and the cost of goods to repair and replace items and the labor that goes with that. Those are the main drivers in the rent increases. Because even before we saw these national election results, a week, 10 days beforehand, I could already sense that the other side, the progressive tenant union side, could see what was coming, and they're starting to squawk again about the rent is too dang high. I got to paraphrase what they say because I don't want to use their words. And we've got to come back out and say the rent may be high, but it's not the greedy landlord. It's not the greedy housing provider. It's the real estate taxes have gone up so much in the last 4 years. It's the insurance premiums that have driven this out of control in the last 4 or 5 years. It's the cost of goods. I mean, to replace a hot water tank today is double the cost of replacing a hot water tank 4 years ago. Those are the things that are out there that we've got to address, that we've got to be very publicly talking about to diffuse the attack that's otherwise going to come back at us about, oh, we're greedy. All we care about is making more money on the backs of the poor. No, we're just trying to run a business. We're just trying to provide safe, affordable, clean housing. And that's all we're trying to do. At the national level, we're in a great shape. The 4 horsemen of the apocalypse that I've been worried about on behalf of real estate investors, that's gone away for the next 4 years. But now we've got to win it at the county and state level.
Well, Jeff, what I really love about that is, really our constitutional system by design was one where the federal government ought to not really do a whole lot, and most of what has meaningful impact on your life was done at a municipal level or at a statewide level. As you get down and down closer to you, right?
Right.
And those are hard anymore to really concentrate because all the big questions seem to be federal questions, and that's the sexy election. But the stuff that usually has the day-to-day impact on, you mentioned real estate taxes and a lot of different stuff, are the things that happen in those boring elections that don't get the same kind of
Right.
press and just kind of lose attention. So I think that's a
Yeah.
good point.
Yeah, I mean, let's face it, it's a whole lot more likely that I'm going to be in a grocery store and I'm going to bump into a member of city council than I am going to bump into my member of Congress.
Mm-hmm.
And if I can say something then, it's important to do it. Like, hey, are you aware of how much the real estate taxes are going up in this area? Just not off the inflated value of my property, but also the fact that we keep passing more and more levies. So anyhow, that's an illustration of it. I know you guys have got a bunch of questions, and let's just plow into them, man. Let's talk about the good things, and let's talk about the challenges and opportunities that we got coming.
Yeah, I mean, we want to be the first to ignore our own advice and just talk about the sexy things that people want to do. So we're going to focus on the federal side for now because that election just happened. I guess statewide stuff happened too. But let's just start with a real broad question. We know everybody knows by now, if you're not living under a rock, what the results of the election were. What do you kind of see, before we get into real estate, the short-term and long-term economic impact of the election? What do you kind of expecting or forecasting?
We saw the short term 2 weeks ago. Tuesday night, 2 weeks ago, we saw the futures skyrocket. We have seen the stock market have some significant gains in the last 2 weeks. We won't keep all of that. We'll give some of that back, but it's still been a nice thing. Longer term, it really is going to come down to what happens in the first 100 days. What happens in that first 100 days? And I pray right now from my lips to God's ear that we do not see the same debacle we saw the last time. I pray that we do not spend a whole bunch of time on getting the Speaker of the House selected. I pray that we just stick with Mike Johnson. He is a brilliant, hardworking, honorable man, and we execute the plan that he has. And I know that plan. He's had an opportunity to share it in some private meetings I've been in, and that plan will make a big difference. If we can execute that, if they can execute that plan, that in the first 100 days, we will see some long-term economic benefits. What we'll see happen right away is we're going to see the problem on the southern border get addressed probably by 9 p.m. January 20th. Executive orders will be signed and things will happen that day on inauguration night. Before the celebrations are over, the executive orders are going to be signed and things are going to happen. The next thing they're going to do is they're going to go after removing regulations to lower the cost of energy. Energy is a driver of the cost of everything. Whether it's the bread and milk you buy at the grocery store, whether it's the sheet of drywall or whatever that your contractor's buying at Home Depot, energy is a driving cost and all that. We're going to move on getting the cost of energy down. And then Congress is going to go after extending the tax cuts that are set to expire at the end of 2025. Go ahead and get those extended out so we don't have to do a bunch of massive estate planning because of the drop in the exemption, so that we can continue to make the 199A, that 20% huge stimulus effect. We can keep that in place and keep some of these other tax cuts there. And I think we'll see some of the depreciation stuff come back that's getting phased out. I think we'll see that as well. Those are the big three that I see. If they can execute on that, if they don't have a bunch of show ponies prancing around for clicks and likes and follows and book deals, I'm not going to mention any names yet, but I know a few of them that are in Congress and they're show ponies. They're not workhorses. If we can get the workhorses to coalesce, because he doesn't have that big of a majority. He's going to have like a 4-vote, 5-vote majority, Mike Johnson. We got to push a bunch of stuff through. One of the other things to watch is who ends up becoming the chairman of the House Financial Services Committee. You're like, okay, Jeff, now you're getting really nerdy. Yep, I am. 2 guys are vying for it. They're both good men. Let me say that again. They're both good men. Spent a lot of time talking to both of them. My preference is with my friend Andy Barr, because he's the guy that I co-wrote a bill with. Okay, I just have more time with Andy Barr. I have nothing against French Hill. French is a great guy out of Arkansas, good man. Andy's out of Kentucky. Both of them are going to be great leaders. But if we can see Andy Barr come in as chairman of financial services, that is going to remove some roadblocks that are there regarding the cost of housing. That is going to get some of the obstruction out of the way. And by the way, I've talked to Andy personally in a private room with other members there, other people there, going about the Corporate Transparency Act in FinCEN. Andy looked me straight in the eye in front of about 15 people and said, we couldn't do anything to stop it. They had the majority in the House and the Senate. Biden was in the White House. We couldn't do anything to stop it. And he's like, Jeff, if we switch it, you know what we're going to do. So I think we're going to now, but that does not change the fact we still have to comply with it through the end of this year. But I think we'll see it go away. Right. And Sean, those rules that you were talking about that are coming a year from now, I think they're going to go away. I think they're going to go away. I got a lot more stuff, but I'm going to let you guys get a couple words in.
Well, let me ask you this, from an economic standpoint, and, we're lawyers, so we just kind of look at history and
right,
kind of project and give opinions and stuff. But one of the things that I've seen posted online, but I've also, seen other countries who have done this and the pains that they went through to make it happen, which is paying down the national debt. And I know, that has been a campaign promise of President-elect Trump. And my understanding is if you do that, which is probably a good long-term thing, there are short-term ramifications that aren't always the best. You have any thoughts or ideas on that?
I got a lot. So let's be clear. For the last 60 years, both major parties have contributed to the economic problem that we have by continuing to spend like drunken sailors on steroids. I want everybody to hear this is a bipartisan caused problem. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And like I said, it's taken us 60 years to get there. In 1980, we crossed the $1 trillion national debt. 44 years later, we've now rolled across $37 trillion. So yes, the pace has accelerated. What we have to recognize is that we have to have the discipline to get back on a long-term sustainable scope. And we have to do that with demographic realities in mind. The baby boom generation is going to be completely out of the workforce in the next 6 to 7 years, unless they didn't save enough for retirement. That means that demographically, we've got to really pay attention to what's going on. Can we fix it all in 4 years? No. Can we fix it all in 10 years? No. Can we start on the right path? Yes. Can we do things that if we can do a large trim of stupid federal spending, and we can really force people to have, if we could force the federal government to have to do what every American's had to do for the last 4 years and go, I only got so much money, how am I going to prioritize and allocate it? And we do that same thing to Congress and go, listen, you can't just conjure it out of thin air anymore. You can't inflate us out of this thing. We can slow down to where I feel like inflation will not become hyperinflation. It will still be here, but we can grow our way out of it through a combination of stimulate the U.S. economy, massive cuts in federal spending in a lot of areas. And here's the last part. We need to put us in a position as a as a global force of exporting energy throughout the world. Exporting particularly LNG, liquefied natural gas, across the world so that people use dollars to buy it from us to heat their homes, whether it's in Brussels or whether it's in France or whether it's in England or whether it's in Hong Kong. It doesn't matter. They got to buy our gas to heat their house.
So just, Jeff, let's talk about current laws, federal laws that are in place that impact real estate investors.
Yeah, there's way too many of them.
Yeah, there's a lot. Now, again, we mentioned most of these laws happen at a local level, but there are federal laws that have a big impact on real estate. Dodd-Frank, SAFE Act, Corporate Transparency Act. You've already mentioned some of those. What does the trend of the current administration and the change in kind of control, how does that bode for what kind of changes we might see in those laws?
I think we're going to see the CTA go away. The Corporate Transparency Act is going to go away. I don't know if SAFE Act will go away, but Dodd-Frank is going to get a major revision. Dodd-Frank is going to get a major revision, if not, gutted. The mindset and the mentality that I'm encountering from most of the Republicans that I meet, that's what they want to do. Now, the key to this whole thing is going to be clear, decisive leadership in the House, in the Senate, and from the White House. And I can tell you that this time around, we're in a very different environment than we were 8 years ago. And I'm really optimistic about this because of what I've been privy to. In fact, I'm going to be in DC tomorrow working on some of the things that we're talking about today. There is a plan. 8 years ago, there was not a plan. There is a hiring list today that's already being acted on. 8 years ago, there wasn't.
Oh, you can tell by how they've already announced names. They've been thinking about this for a while.
And this means that they understand you've got a 100-day honeymoon and we are going to hit the ground running and get after it. And we're going to see that bills get introduced and get moved through in a way that's going to be as fast as possible. Now, I expect my friends on the other side of the aisle, And yes, I have friends that are Democrats and they were all reelected, and I'm thrilled. I'm happy for them. Okay. Because they were bipartisan supporters of HR 3464. Great guys, all three of them that I can think of off the top of my head. They're going to be on the team that's going to try and slow stuff down. I expect that. But we've got to push this stuff through. And that way we can see the Corporate Transparency Act go away. We can see Dodd-Frank get reformed. We can see restrictions on seller financing get lifted. We can see a lot of the burdens that are in our way come back. I mean, the Wall Street Journal had a very powerful argument a couple of days ago on we've really wasted decades and billions of dollars to try and improve home ownership, and we've not moved the needle. And the compelling argument I want to make is, if you can get government out of the way and allow ethical capitalism to have a free runway, and notice I say ethical capitalism, with its foundation back in Judeo-Christian morals and ethics, I'm very optimistic for what we can see in this country in the next 4, 8, 10, 12 years.
Jeff, if you were given a vote on how to prioritize which one of these laws are addressed first, what order would you attack these?
I would go with the order that I'm hearing coming from the planners already, coming from Mike Johnson, coming from the administration, which is we got to stop the border. If we do not have a border, we do not have a sovereign nation. Then it is all about energy, 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 because we've got to get the cost of living down. We've got to get it to where yoga moms are not complaining about the cost of their organic veggies. We got to get it where people can afford to feed their families. We got to get energy down for that. And then we've got to go after, let's extend these tax cuts out so the businesses can keep hiring people, keep making money, keep people employed. Because otherwise, we were going to be going down a path where businesses couldn't afford to keep people on payroll. Those are things. And the other thing that is going to happen, and this may be news, this may not be news, we're going to see a massive demographic and restructuring shift of the Washington, D.C. bureaucracy. It is no small secret that the plan is to take a number of the massive federal agencies that are all headquartered in D.C. and spread them out across America. And we may move on some agency out to Topeka, Kansas, and somebody else may be out in Winslow, Arizona, and somebody else is going to be in Huntsville, Alabama, and we may somebody to Kalamazoo, Michigan. We may move these different agencies in different places because we're going to break up this deep concentration that is built up over the last 80, 100 years, and we're going to break it up and we're going to spread it out. And it's going to in part, quote, drain the swamp, but in part, it's also going to make these people more understanding of what really happens in America. Because when you get into DC, you lose track of what really is going on in Peoria, in Springfield, Missouri. You just don't see it. So we want to get it spread out. That is a way that we're going to really shake up the entrenched bureaucracy out there.
So let's talk about also, you've mentioned HR 3464, the Affordable Homeownership Access Act.
Yeah.
Bipartisan.
I'm going to interrupt you, Andy. I just want to be clear. That is a bipartisan piece of legislation that I wrote with the help of staff from Vicente Gonzalez's office, Democrat out of Texas, reelected, and with Andy Barr's office, Republican out of Kentucky. So people understand, we can work on both sides of the aisle. When both sides of the aisle come together, we can make things happen. So thanks for letting me clarify that.
Yeah, break down the idea behind it, and then what do you think its prospects are given the election?
Okay, so the idea behind it is to adjust a restriction, adjust an exemption inside of Dodd-Frank. When Dodd-Frank came along the road and enhanced the SAFE Act, we went from having an unlimited opportunity to sell or finance properties and take advantage of the installment sale feature of the tax code to where we could only do 3 transactions in a 12-month period of time, and we couldn't do all 3 the same. The idea is to take that exemption number of 3 and adjust it to 24. We would have moved that bill through the House this last session, but a bunch of representatives and lobbyists for the mortgage bankers held us back. In speaking with Congressman Barr's office, who chairs a subcommittee and now I think will chair the whole committee, he has said he's going to take that same bill, 3464, make sure that the three Democrats, Boyle, Gonzalez, and Clair, all still sign off on it, because we're not going to change anything. They're going to stick it in a larger piece of legislation that the mortgage bankers want to see, and it's going to come through, and it's going to be part of a bigger package. And they're basically going to say, hey, a spoonful of sugar is going to help your medicine go down, Mr. Mortgage Bankers, but we're going to let free enterprise reign. That's the plan.
And you think the prospects, I have to imagine, are looking up for the bill given the changes?
I'm more excited now than ever before. And this is the harsh political reality of what I live in. There's a number of things that could derail this, and I know that. But I also remember one of our heroes, the late Senator William Roth. That man spent 10 years advocating for Roth IRAs before he had a chance to stick it in the bill that Newt Gingrich told Bill Clinton, you're signing or else. And so we've not been banging on this thing for 10 years, and we don't have the power of a United States senator, but we've got something going on. We're making progress.
So let's talk about rulemaking. You talked about moving the administrative agencies around. That's kind of a whole nother thing that I think is going to be happening. Well, I'm sure we're going to start seeing big moves happening day one, in part because the administrative agencies are part of the executive branch of the government. So
Right.
On one hand, you don't really need Congress, although unless Congress pass a certain law mandating something, you may have to deal with Congress. So there's going to be a little bit the president can do on his own, or maybe a lot, and some he doesn't. But we know that agencies can directly impact real estate, small business, a variety of other things through rulemaking. What do you kind of anticipate seeing on day one with respect to the agencies beyond moving them around? I know they're going to be doing that. I see there's a lot of value to that, but they're talking about cutting some. A lot of these rules are probably just bad rules that they may get rid of. What are your thoughts?
The idea behind this, that we're going to flesh out a lot more tomorrow. Okay, I'm literally in DC most all day tomorrow for this purpose, talking about going after the bad rulemaking process and stopping it. The strategy is we're going to identify bad rules, and I've already identified one that came out of HUD, and we're going to identify the best way to challenge it. And it may be through a lawsuit, that we may file a lawsuit, and we may have a quote friendly defendant now in charge of that federal agency who will agree to the terms of that lawsuit or a consent order. And then we may get a federal court signing an order saying that such and such can no longer happen. I'm not going to give any specific examples, but that's a really good strategy, because that prevents the rule being shifted back again 4 years, 6 years, 8 years, or whatever, because we know the political pendulum will swing someday. But if we can get court orders saying that XYZ agency shall not prescribe, ABC to real estate investors, then we've got it locked down to where it can't come back and bite us again.
A couple specific rules come to mind.
So
Go ahead, Sean.
So on that, and the approach going to court, we've had a Supreme Court decision not too long ago that struck down Chevron, which was giving deference to rulemaking.
Yep.
But it doesn't seem to have stopped these agencies. They don't seem to care.
Oh no. I mean, guys, it's just like the case out of the Northern District of Alabama involving the Corporate Transparency Act. The current mindset of these government agencies is, we're God, we don't care. Yes, we don't have to enforce it against this group of people, but everybody else it applies to. And so, Sean, the Supreme Court reversing the Chevron doctrine opened up the door for us to go do this now. And the other thing it did is it now has made it far more important that we get people in Congress that actually work, that actually think about the implementation of the legislation that they're passing. What is the rule going to look like? How will it apply? And what I'm excited to see is a trend, particularly on one side of the aisle, where more and more members of Congress are individuals who for years sat at a desk and signed the front of payroll checks and had to look at P&Ls and had to look at balance sheets and had to develop a marketing plan and had to understand the consequences of their decisions and how those decisions would impact the family members of their employees. And so I'm seeing more and more business-minded members of Congress and less institutional, whether from the academia world or whether from other worlds in there. And it's an exciting thing to see.
Now, how much flexibility do you think the executive branch has when we're talking about agencies in rulemaking, or how much are the versus how much are they going to have to really work with Congress or bring lawsuits like you mentioned?
I think it's going to take a mixture of everything. I think it's going to take a very strong mixture. And we literally have to shock and awe to get it to get everything to go. And we've got a lot of different levers that we can push and pull. I've spent time talking with different members of Congress regarding if we're down to our last gasp, you know, for a while there, the only way we stopped the Biden administration's renter bill of rights was because we controlled the House of Representatives by 1 and 2 votes, 219 to 217 kind of a situation. And we could stop, we could deny appropriations to certain things that were happening. And so we had, so that was one of our last gasp maneuvers that we came up with. And we used it. We used it. It was, you know, that's not my favorite way, but that's a method that we can do. And we've got the ability to control in the House at the appropriations level. We've got the ability to control regarding legislation and undoing restrictions. And so we've got all sorts of different things, but we've only got a narrow time window to really make it happen. And you have to understand there are going to be large voices screaming because we're taking away their funding. They're going to exaggerate the implications of this. I mean, I've been through this before in the state of Ohio, and I can predict for you right now what's going to happen. It's going to be a gross exaggeration of the consequences. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but when I testified in front of, you know, both the Ohio House and the Ohio Senate, changing a bill regarding emotional support animals and taking the word shall to the word may, so that the Ohio Civil Rights Commission may award attorney's fees instead of shall award attorney's fees. That one word change, I was accused of trying to bring back Jim Crow and get rid of all of the vital civil rights legislation we've ever had for the last 40 years. Just because I wanted to change shall to may. I wanted to give the Civil Rights Commission more discretion. So I expect that to happen in the national forum.
So if you had to, you know, for the real estate investor out there that's looking for something to root for here when we're talking about agencies, what are the big name agencies that, you know, from kind of top to bottom that a real estate investor ought to really care about? You know, is it?
There's 3 that jump right to my mind right off the top.
Go ahead.
HUD. You've got to pay attention to HUD. And the good news is, folks, the cavalry is coming. I've got some friends that are going into HUD, and they're going to make a big difference. The next 2 agencies are CFPB, Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. Despite being declared unconstitutional twice, we still have it. Riddle me that, guys, okay? And then the last one is the Federal Trade Commission, FTC. Okay? I mean, I remember I remember FTC investigators coming to a technology company that I'm a minority owner of, a general counsel of, and serving us with a subpoena for documentation. They did not understand what they were asking for. And our chief technology officer said, gentlemen, for me to deliver that to you in hard copy, you're going to need to put 2 rail cars outside of our office. They didn't understand. So all of those, so there's a lack of real true understanding of what the true impact is of a lot of these rules and regulations and how they enforce it. And what I'm looking for is if we can see HUD become common sense, if we can watch the CFPB get shrunk dramatically, and if we can see the Federal Trade Commission be back to what it's supposed to do, from an economic real estate investment perspective, I'm very excited, very excited. And if I thought about it, I'd probably come up with 3 more agencies that I'd want to go after, like FHFA, get them to bring Freddie and Fannie back into some sort of common sense arena and go from there.
So we also have the big one, of course, that we've heard about is the Trump tax cuts. And I think that takes 2 forms, and this obviously impacts real estate in the sense that you have capital gains tax and things like that when you're dealing with real estate. But there's two ways to talk about this, and you've talked about the one, which is we've got old Trump laws that are set to expire. Okay, so the question has been for a long time now, will those expire? Will they be continued? Whatever the case may be, you address that, and you can address that again if you'd like. But what we'd also like to talk about is what new laws are going to be proposed, because as I understand his platform, he's advocating for more tax relief. That could mean a different capital gains tax going forward. That might mean different income tax brackets going forward. What are you hearing and seeing and think that that's going to look like?
So there's 2 things that I can share on that one. Number one, as I've touched on before, and you heard me say it, we're going to see an extension of those tax cuts that were passed in late 17, became mostly effective in 2018, and have continued on, particularly the 199A, the 20% for a lot of businesses. We're going to see that extended and hopefully made permanent. But I also think we are going to see additional tax cuts in the capital gains and elsewhere, because this administration believes that through a combination of increased tariffs, i.e. a massive reversal of what we've done for the last 90 years under the Bretton Woods theory of, hey, if you're on our side against communism, we're going to let you free trade with us and we'll subsidize it. We're going to see that flip back over. And now if you want to sell your stuff on our shores, you got to pay the price to get in the door. So we're going to see a lot of revenue come in off of tariffs. And I do not think that's inflationary. I do not think that's inflationary. Congress spending, the government spending beyond its control, beyond creating money out of thin air, that's inflationary. The second thing that we're going to see is if we can become, once again, the world's largest energy exporter, oil and natural gas, the revenue that will come in from that will make it to where we can reduce taxes without raising federal debt. That's I think the plan. That is the plan that I've heard articulated. And I've got to tell you, and I don't know how many people are listening to this right now, and that's fine, but I got to tell you, some of these plans have been in process for over a year. And there's been a tremendous amount of effort and thought put into some of these plans. And I'm the beneficiary. I just get to sit there and listen. And I get to add maybe my 2 drops of water to the Olympic-sized swimming pool. Okay. But it's still 2 drops of water going in the right direction, if you know what I mean. And so I'm excited. I'm very excited because this time around, we're not going to make the same mistakes we made 8 years ago. We're not going to make the same mistakes we made 2 years ago. And I'm really excited to see it. I think with Mike Johnson and Steve Scalise running the House, that we're going to see stuff happen. And I think we've already seen some strategic things happening in the House to make it less distracted.
What about in the self-directed IRA space? I know that space is kind of special to you. You've spent a lot of time in it. Are there any nuggets you think that could be forthcoming that would impact that?
Yeah, I do. And you're right. First of all, it's a space that I've given a lot of time, sweat, and blood on. I got to give a shout out once again to my good friend John Heyer, IRAlawyer.com. I mean, John has now been gobbled up by a large family office, but John and I were at the tip of the spear with thousands of people behind us on killing the Build Back Better bill that came after self-directed IRAs. And I mean, everybody that was involved with that, thank you so very much. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Because when you have members of Congress look at you and say, Jeff, you mean if we take this out of the bill, the phone calls will stop? That tells you that thousands of people are concerned about what's happening to them. And that's just a wonderful thing, to which I got to say thank you. IRAs, self-directed IRAs, I think we're going to see two things. We're not going to see any attacks on them. Yay, no attacks on self-directed IRAs. And the second thing is, I think that we're going to see no special focus by the IRS on them. Now, please do not interpret what I said to be go out there and do all the PTs you want to do. No, please never do a prohibited transaction. Never, 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 ever. Okay. I had a guy on the phone yesterday, talked him out of a PT. You know, he thought he was going to just go ahead and do it and not get caught. And I said, no, there's a better way to do it. And so I showed him a cleaner, simpler way of doing it. And he embraced it immediately. So when it comes to self-directed IRAs, I don't see any threats on the horizon. And I don't see any bad legislation on the horizon. And I do not see where the IRS is going to become more aggressive on them.
You know, because you brought up the IRS, I guess I have to ask the question, because they might be on the chopping block, for instances, when we're talking about reducing government bloat, which is obviously a goal of this administration. Do you think there's going to be downsizing, or do you think they have plans with the IRS specifically?
I am not aware of any specific plans with the IRS. I'm not aware of any. I can tell you that downsizing federal employees is a very challenging prospect. And I think the fastest and best way to do it is to simply announce, guess what? The Internal Revenue Service is moving from Washington, D.C. to Des Moines, Iowa. And yeah, and I'm not wishing anything bad on Des Moines, but I'm just saying, let's get people to have to decide, do I want to stay in DC, Virginia, Maryland, or will I move? And we're going to see a lot of shakeout. We're going to see a lot of people not want to move. That's what they're hoping for. That's what they're expecting. And they're not going to want to pull their kids out of school. They're not going to want to leave those communities. And I'm fine. That's okay, great. But I also think it's not just to drain the swamp method, but I think it's also to educate federal employees to understand that what happens in Des Moines or Springfield, Missouri, or Winslow, Arizona, or Spokane, Washington is not what happens in Washington, D.C. And you've got to understand that we are a huge, amazing, diverse, highly blessed country. And until you understand and see that diversity by geography and makeup and function, you're just going to miss it.
So what other ways out there that we haven't discussed? Is there something out there that you know is coming down the horizon that you think may have a big impact on real estate?
I think there are a couple of things that I've touched on slightly, but I haven't fully examined. I think where these new agencies move to is going to have impact on the real estate market in those areas. It's also going to have impact on the real estate market where they're leaving from. But I also think that we've got two other things to watch out for here. I am bullish on real estate in America for two reasons. And when I say bullish, I mean buy, hold, own, cash flow. break even cash flow if necessary, because I believe America's best days are still in front of it if we really truly as a people want to do that. And even if they aren't the best days, we don't get to realize all of them. I think we're still going to have some inflationary pressure that's going to push up prices anyhow. So I'm bullish on that for the foreseeable future. I think the last thing I'm going to throw at you is, and this is just a suggestion. I don't know enough to talk about it except to give you guys a suggestion. I think we got to look at what the impact that we're going to have on our economy as a result of this administration now the new administration embracing cryptocurrency. I think we've really got to look at that. I think that is going to change so much. One of the things that told me why I really liked Bernie Moreno as a beginning candidate. I mean, this was pre-primary Ohio Republican primary. When I met Bernie, and like, I knew he was the guy. When I found out that his second successful business exit was a company that learned how to put auto titles on the blockchain. And so the record keeping problem went away. The identity theft problem goes away. The bureaucratic delay problems go away. All of those things can apply to the real estate industry as well and have massive impact. So I'm excited.
Well, and one thing is for sure true with regard to the cryptocurrency industry, Bitcoin, so on and so forth, is that the change, the last 4 years have been hostile at best. They have not encouraged innovation. They have pushed it off overseas in large respect. That community came out pretty hard for Trump because of a lot of that. And it seems to be no doubt that, hey, you know, we're going to innovate again here in America, and it's going to start in crypto.
I think we're going to see banking reimagined with the way we can use cryptocurrency to move money instead of wires in the SWIFT system.
Oh yeah.
And the last thing I'm going to tell you, it just came to me in answer to your question, Andy. I think that the United States Supreme Court 2 years from now is going to look very different than it looks now. And I think we're going to see a strict constructionist, constitutionalist minded court for the next 30 years at a minimum.
All right.
I think we're going to see one, maybe two younger versions of Clarence Thomas on the Supreme Court. And I have no issue with that whatsoever.
Bold predictions from Jeff Watson, and that's why we have him.
Yeah, I mean, I've stuck my neck out way big time, and I mean, before the election, I called it, and I came in pretty close. I called 300 electoral votes. He hit 312. I called 53 in the Senate. We've hit 53 in the Senate. I called 225 in the House. We're stuck at about 221, 222, and unfortunately, I wanted Ohio 13 to flip red because of a very good friend of mine that ran an amazing campaign, is 7,800 votes short.
Yeah.
And, you know, yeah.
Well, Jeff, thanks so much for being with us. Awesome conversation. Always enjoy talking with you about this kind of stuff. Tell our listeners how they can find you. I know you have a TikTok channel.
I do have TikTok. I've been off of it for the last week because I've just had so many other things going on, but I was trying to really engage and grow my TikTok channel. And I think I'm going to hand it off to a virtual assistant in the near future. But the number one way to get in touch with me, the main way, is go to my blog, watsoninvested.com, watsoninvested.com. And please, 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 if you go there, do two things. Sign up for the free email newsletter. It's free, so it's worth what you pay for it, okay? And then the second thing is, if you're not sure, read some of the articles I make available. If those articles make sense to you and you want that for free showing up in your email box every now and then, check it out. Do it.
All right. Well, Jeff, we appreciate you being with us. Let's do it again soon.
Let's do it. It's a lot of fun. I mean, I like coming on here and being very cautious and unsure about what I think and unwilling to stick my neck out.
Yeah. Cautious is your middle name.
I know. I'm sorry. I have an opinion and I'm willing to share it.
Yeah, well, that's why we love you. Jeff, thanks so much for being with us. We'll see you next time.
All right. Peace.
All right, everybody, that is our show. Thanks for joining us. Make sure to join us for the Creative Finance Collective today, and we'll see you next week.
Have a good day, everyone.